PNC, America's Black News Channel. Watch us on all major cable providers and major streaming platforms. Finally, news that speaks to us.
Tom Brady unretiring just a short bit after he announced that he was retiring in the first place. So joining us to discuss this and much more, we've got sports journalist Kim Davis with us from Houston this morning. Kim, thank you so much for waking up and helping us break this all down. How you doing?
I'm good. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Excited to chat with you. We want to get to March Madness, of course, but we'll start with Tom Brady. He really stole the show Sunday. We were supposed to see that he was retiring this year. It only lasted for 41 days, though. Do you think this means the Buccaneers are an instant contender for next year's Super Bowl?
Yeah, well, I think they're a lot closer than they were about 2 days ago. It depends on how they reload their roster, which having Tom Brady makes it easier for them to do because everybody wants to play with Tom. You're right. I'm not real surprised. I was a little surprised that he retired because he played at such a high level and he's such a competitor. So maybe emotionally, initially, he thought, you know what, I'm just going to take a break. But it did upend the sports world, especially right now, where everybody's trying to figure out who is going to be my quarterback, or at least some teams are as they get ready to head into the draft. So it definitely became the sports story of the weekend. And it's been a very busy week of sports stories.
Were you surprised? I mean, was there any chatter behind the scenes in the sports world that maybe he was going to come out of retirement, or were you just as shocked as the rest of us?
So I think I was a little surprised at this point. You know, when he first retired, I was like, yeah, well, maybe in a few days he's going to change his mind and he's going to come back and play. But like you said, it had been 41 days. So I thought, I guess Tom Brady really has decided he's on to his next chapter. So to find out yesterday, it was like, whoa, was a little bit out of nowhere. It was a little shocking, but I know the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are breathing a huge sigh of relief today.
Well, I'm sure a lot of Patriots fans and now Buccaneers fans I used to live in Boston, so I know people, they love Tom Brady up there, and now people down in Tampa love him too. And even if you're not a Bucs or Patriots fan, people just love Brady. So I'm sure no one's complaining about him coming back, because it kind of makes the game a little bit more exciting, I'd say, to have him there.
It does make the game a little more exciting. And here's the other thing that happened. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers were going to have to figure out who's going to be our quarterback. Mm-hmm. And they didn't have high draft picks because they finished so well in the season. So they were in a bit of a place of trying to figure out who's going to lead their team. So now they get to say, hey, we can build from where we were and we can get back to our winning ways. And it does make them a favorite, definitely in the NFC South. And if they can rebuild, bring Gronk back, work on their defense, it makes them a contender for the championship, because whenever you have a healthy Tom Brady at the level he's playing, you have a chance to win.
I know that's right. We're going to stick with the NFL and switch gears, though. We reported last week that quarterback Deshaun Watson will not be facing criminal charges in connection with sexual misconduct allegations. We know several teams are making moves to get him. Where do you think he'll end up?
You know, it's such a tough question. I've covered Deshaun since he came into the league. And because he has a no trade clause, he gets the final say on where he goes. So teams that are interested are scheduling some meetings with him. That there's talk about the Saints and the Panthers, because he has to waive that clause before a team can even make a deal with the Houston Texans. There are other teams who've been interested. There was always talk about Philadelphia. That's off the table. His camp has basically said no to Philly. So I'm not really sure. Some of the teams we thought maybe possibilities have made moves. Denver was a team. Of course, last week they traded for Russell Wilson, though that's off the table. You know, maybe Pittsburgh is an opportunity. We're not really sure about that. It seems like the two teams that have come out and said, hey, we'd like to meet with him, that may have some capital, because that's the key. They've got to have some draft picks for the Texans to work with, or the Saints and the Panthers right now. But it really depends on where Deshaun will waive his no trade clause to go.
Right, we'll stay tuned for that. We'll move on to the NCAA tournament now. It's officially time for the big dance. We know the brackets are set. So what are your take on the matchups? Do you see any big upsets happening?
You know, there's always that first weekend of some Cinderella teams that come through and are able to, pull off the upset. Houston came in I see the bracket now at 18. Houston has played well this year. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Cougars, who of course got to the Final Four last year, maybe win a couple of games. I don't think they have quite the steam to get to the Final Four again. There's always talk about who was snubbed, what are the seedings, should Tennessee have been ranked higher? In terms of teams that I think will get all the way, I expect to see maybe Michigan get to the Final Four. Kentucky is really loaded. I think this is a year that Kentucky could get back and win it. Gonzaga is in the hunt again. So, but if I had to pick a team, which I hate to do, I'm just telling you, Michelle, I would say right now, I would say Kentucky, I think is a team that you can see standing with the trophy at the end of March Madness.
All right. Well, you heard it here first. She says Kentucky. You're probably right. I can't keep it all straight, so I won't even begin to make a guess. What about the women's tournament? Should we expect maybe South Carolina or UConn to be the finalists in the Final Four there?
You know, I think whenever those teams are playing, you have to always look at them as being potentials to go all the way. I mean, South Carolina has been so good for so long. UConn has been good for so long. I really like what they're doing at South Carolina, and Dawn Staley has the way she's led that team. I would pick probably South Carolina, but you just can't ever count out UConn and the history. They know how to win. They know they've been there before. But yeah, I would definitely go with South Carolina on the women's side.
Okay. What about any big upsets, you think?
So I think, yeah, I don't really have an upset for you on the women's side because, quite frankly, I don't cover the women as much as I cover the men. So to be honest, I don't have an upset on the women's side. I would think more on the men's side of maybe there being some upsets, but I do think South Carolina all the way.
All right. Now, coming off of last year's NCAA tournament, the way the women's teams were treated went viral. You know, we saw images that a lot of people just were disgusted by. Do you think there'll be some major changes this year with how things are set up?
I would hope so. I mean, certainly that was an awful look for the NCAA that the women were, practicing in ballrooms and that the facilities were nowhere near what the men's facilities were. It was a bad look for the NCAA. They definitely don't want that to happen this year. So yes, they've got to have some major changes. That was awful. And even if you are not a fan, even for people who are not necessarily a fan of women's basketball, they were appalled to see what the women had to deal with as they were going along the same path as men was. So yes, to answer your question, the NCAA will definitely do some things differently this year. I know there was a lot of talk about it after last season and how to make those changes and to create a different environment. So I definitely expect to see it differently this year, and you can't blame COVID.
Right. And before we let you go, of course it is Women's History Month. You have had a successful career as a Black woman in sports journalism. Can you speak about that journey and what it's taken you to get to this point?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Believe it or not, I've covered sports for 30 years. I started when I was 12, if you're doing the math. But it is amazing that I was the first Black woman in Houston to cover sports. And right now I'm the only Black woman in Houston covering sports. And that's really unfortunate, actually, because it's 2022 and we have such a presence in terms of being in the game. So I will tell you, the journey has been winding and challenging. I felt like the thing that kept me pushing through is I thought my voice and perspective has been needed because it's a huge part of our news cycle is sports, is telling those stories about sports and the people in sports. So when I started, there were really not very many women. And I'll give you just a sense of, here's a quick story. When I first started covering the Houston Oilers, the football team prior to the Texans, I'd go out to practice and cover camp and practice. And if I had to go to the ladies' room, there wasn't a ladies' room. I'd have to go into the locker room, into the showers where the restrooms were, and somebody would have to watch the door, right? That was how it was when I started. They didn't have any facilities for women because there really weren't any women. It's not that bad anymore. There are ladies' rooms now, so I don't have that problem. But that's how the journey started, and it has been it's been fun, but it's definitely been challenging along the way in TV, radio, and in print. So I am hanging in there.
Well, thank you for your perseverance. I'm sure there's so many young Black sports journalists that look up to you in your career. So thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us and your insight. We'll look forward to having you on the show again sometime to chat sports with us. Thanks.
Absolutely. Make it a great day.
You too.